Hey, good afternoon, friends, or morning, depending on where you are. This is the Mennonites Against Militarism webinar, and we're going to give folks a chance to trickle in here. We had a lot of people to register. We had about 100 people, so that's really encouraging. We thank you for taking time out of your day to come hear what we are up to. I see a lot of good names that we know and some new friends, but I see H.A. Penner is on. I see a lot of good folks that we know. John David Thacker. John Lapp, one of my bosses, so, make me look good. Roger Farmer, a Mennonite Against Militarism out there in Iowa. Long time. Good to see you, Roger, or good to see your name. Weldon Nisley's on, long-time pastor, CPT here. We got... It's inverted almost. A lot of the people in our audience here should be speaking more than me. At least they have much more experience and stuff. But hopefully, we're going to be able to tell you what we're doing and get you excited and show that we really want to tap into everyone's experience and expertise in the course of this campaign. While people are getting in, I thought maybe I'd just talk about the goals of our webinar here and what our time's going to be for, and just take care of a couple other housekeeping details. So we're all going to introduce ourselves, and that'll be made clear here once we get going. But in general, the goals for this webinar is to tell you about what this Mennonites Against Militarism campaign is about, how it got started, what our focuses are, and what our big goals are and our dreams for this campaign, and then even a little bit more about how you can get involved. So hopefully we're going to do all that. We'll do it within an hour's time for certain, maybe a little bit sooner. If you have questions, I encourage you to put them in the Q&A bar there, and we'll be going through them. If there are some that come up that we don't get to just in the course of our conversation, we'll have a little bit of time at the end to make sure we do that. We're not going to get into the weeds like on details on specific militarism topics. And so that's one thing I would say, this is more general and introductory. So if you have a really pertinent comment or question about, the ins and outs of tax resistance, let's say, I'm going to encourage you to contact Titus, offline on that. Maybe that might not be a question we can get to, but you can put them in there. Maybe we'll have time. Maybe we can field some of them. No, and good question from Roger. We can't, the way these webinars are set up, we can't see the folks in the crowd, as it were. You can see us, we can't see you. That's just the way these Zoom webinars work. So, please use the chat. Your name's up there, and we can identify you and call in. All right, Mike Martin's here. Before we get going, I did ask, I thought it'd be good for us to open with a word of prayer. I wonder if Kathy Neufeld-Dunn would do that for us.
Let's be together in prayer. God of life, peace, justice, and hope, guide our steps as we seek to orient ourselves yet again toward Jesus, our Lord. We recognize that Lord means others are not. And so help us to remember whose we are and why we do this ministry. God, give us what we need. Give us your strength, your wisdom, and your love, so that we may learn to love like Jesus, in whose name we pray, and by whose power we serve. Amen.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And we're going to jump in here and go ahead and get started. And we wanted to start out with the first and give you a bit of background of how we even got here and how the folks that make up the MAM Reference Council got together, and just a little bit of backstory on that. And so I was going to ask Sue Parker if she wants to take us down a little history lesson.
Sure. Hi, my name is Sue Parker. I'm the denominational minister of transformative peacemaking for the Mennonite Church. And to give you a little bit of a background of Mennonites Against Militarism, on July 2nd last year, pre-pandemic, yes, do you remember going back pre-pandemic? We did have a convention, And Jess Buller of MCC, Jason Boone of MMN, and I, representing MCUSA, convened a pre-Mennonite gathering in Kansas City called Journey Forward Peacemaking. And we invited about 40 Mennonite leaders across the country actively involved in peace and justice work related to the church. And we wanted to hear from them about the work that they're involved in, how each other's work can intersect, and what issues they see emerging in our collective peace witness that should be addressed as Mennonite peacemakers, especially in the 21st century. Myriads of issues emerged, such as climate justice, climate violence, peace spirituality, patriarchy, inclusion of LGBTQ folks in the church, and many others. And it was a very fruitful time for us to have this conversation together. But we also noted from the gathering that there were also issues that were not addressed. And one of them was on militarism. So in a follow-up Zoom call after the gathering, I think Jason commented on this observation. And then a deeper conversation emerged. The leaders did not think that militarism wasn't important. And in fact, it was very important. And it's more of a complex issue that should be addressed. And how we understand and relate to militarism needs to deepen and be told in a more intersectional ways. And so for that purpose, we gathered names of people who are already involved in the issue of militarism in some form to see if this reference council can help to identify best how to reignite this conversation about militarism in the 21st century, because this is really an important part of our identity as Mennonites and a peace witness that others have seen and have been challenged by. So some of us are here today to kind of talk about that with you and share about why they're also involved in this group.
Yeah, that's right, Sue. And we want to give all our panelists just a chance to check in and introduce themselves. This is what we're calling the MAM Reference Council. But to check in, introduce themselves, talk about why militarism is important to them and why opposing it is worth their time to meet with this group. We started meeting, back at the beginning of the year. We met monthly. We did a lot of emails, really trying to circle around the idea. Okay, so what do we want to do? What would this look like to try to refire this part of militarism? And as Sue said, it was a very scientific process to get this group. We were just kind of like, well, who would be on here? And we started naming names, and you know how these things grow. And we ended up with this great group of different experiences, different approaches, just different life experiences. I think it's been very rich. And so since I have the floor, I'll just keep it here for another second to introduce myself formally. I'm Jason Boone. I work for Mennonite Mission Network, and my primary job is to lead the Peace and Justice Support Network, which encourages and strengthens peace across our church. And militarism is an important issue to me. It's probably the one that got me in the door. Didn't grow up in the tradition, did a lot of reading on theology, had my own personal journey. But the big thing for me was this big thing that we all seem to worship in some ways, civically, militarism, doesn't seem to make sense anymore on a practical level, and it darn sure doesn't make sense on compared to the theology that I'm starting to subscribe to. And knowing that there was a group of people out there who had a long history of this and dedicated to living their faith out in such a way to oppose this, again, this big idol in a way, was inspiring to me. I wanted to be a part of that. And so that was a big reason that I came along. And I really hope to see us make militarism an important part of who we are again. Not that it's not in some of our constituents, but I think in general, we can agree that just the intensity and the visibility of how we address militarism might not be the way it was in the past, and that's fine. Everything has ebbs and flows, and we hope that we're in a time now where we're really going to ebb and do some good work. I'm going to call on some of my colleagues here, and I'm just going to go around the horn as I see them on the screen. Bert, would you mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about why you got involved in this issue?
Hi, my name is Bert Newton, as you can see on the screen, and I'm on the West Coast in Pasadena, California, same as Sue. And I got involved. I answered the invitation to this group because it seemed like we had taken our eye off of militarism and U.S. aggression overseas. And it seemed like, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that was, a lot of us were involved in that. And here in Pasadena, we had, for a decade and a half, we had something called the Palm Sunday Peace Parade, which I think was also done in Elkhart and Harrisonburg and some other places. And it started in the context of the Iraq War. But then as the years went on, we started focusing, the theme began to be more domestic issues. And everything seemed to be, because of what was going on here in the States, even before the current administration, things we are focusing to be on domestic. But meanwhile, the wars overseas continue, even though the media doesn't focus on them. We don't get a lot of reporting. And bombing in Afghanistan has been actually, there have been records. In the last couple of years have been, the amount of bombs the U.S. drops in Afghanistan has been very. Sorry, printer's going off over here, somebody else's. One report I saw said that the U.S. is even concerned that they're running out of bomb making materials. I chased down the source and actually read it in a trade magazine, an arms trade magazine, where they were talking about how they're afraid of running out of bomb making materials because the U.S. is dropping so many bombs. So I really, here and there have been trying to keep my eye on it and trying to say something about it while also being immersed in a lot of domestic justice things. So I'm really glad to see that there's a group in the Mennonite Church that's trying to refocus us also where we need to address the domestic scene, which is they go hand in hand. But we need to be aware and be telling people what's going on abroad and be addressing it through our faith.
Hey, well said. Thank you, Bert. I knew Bert a little bit before we started this. It's been great to get to know him better. I did not know Clara at all, and it's been a pleasure to get to know her. Clara, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're here?
Yeah, hi all. So I am coming to you from Washington, D.C. I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, going to East Chestnut Street Mennonite Church. I'm currently working with Mennonite Central Committee's Washington office. I'm completing a year-long climate policy and advocacy fellowship in cooperation with the Center for Sustainable Climate Solutions, which is a new organization doing a lot of climate work with the Mennonite Church. So I'm immersed in climate all day, but I grew up with a really strong sense of the importance of peace and justice work as that being kind of like the center of Christian work. But I think it was largely cultural until maybe end of high school, starting college. And I've been thinking about peacemaking and peace building and addressing militarism a lot recently because I am writing a law school admissions essay right now that has started to become about pacifism, oddly enough, and specifically something I have noticed within the Mennonite Church, which is this really beautiful and interesting juxtaposition of moral idealism and deep, deep moral pragmatism. So the idealism to envision taking on something like the military-industrial complex, but also this deep pragmatism, this ability to say, okay, how are we going to do this work? So I'm really, really grateful to be a part of this group. I've learned so much from the folks who have been doing this work for much longer than me. But yeah, it is great to be here.
Thank you very much, Clara. And let me bring Titus on. Titus is a guy I've known for a long time. I've been trying to convince him about the evils of militarism, and I think he's starting to come around. So Titus, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Titus Peachy. I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I'm retired from work at Mennonite Central Committee. Thankfully, Jess Fuller is doing that work now, so that gives me time to do other things. I think as I look back over my life, much of my life has been somehow intertwined with, mixed up with war and militarism in terms of exposure to it and struggle against it. It began when I did alternative service in Vietnam as a conscientious objector. I went when I was 20 years old and continued then after I got married to Linda. We went to Laos for 5 years with Mennonite Central Committee, and there, of course, got exposed to the long-term impact of the U.S. air war. And relationships with those people in Vietnam and in Laos really convinced us that to be faithful to those relationships, we have to be war tax resistors. Because even as I wouldn't join the military with my body and go to war and carry a weapon, neither did I want to willingly hand over my tax dollars to pay for those weapons that were harming people that I loved and knew. And when we returned to Lancaster County then, after Laos, we were rather startled to begin to understand that the economy of Lancaster County had many connections to militarism. We did a study on military-related industries in Lancaster County and discovered that there were companies here making components for cluster munitions, which had caused so much difficulty and suffering in the country of Laos. So it was like we could almost connect the dots between the suffering of people in Laos and the prosperous economy in Lancaster County, where jobs at these companies provided good employment and good wages and increased the tax base. So that part of the militarism connection was to our own local economy, and we needed to learn more about that. The other connection has been with veterans and military personnel. As part of my MCC work, I learned to know veterans who became deeply committed to peace, and I just found their stories so moving and so inspiring. And I became involved in something called the GI Rights Hotline, which allows me to speak to active duty military people every day about issues that they're facing. And again, I've discovered that, war and militarism not only harms civilians, not only harms the land, it also creates trauma for the warrior. And so it's been a real eye-opening experience for me to sort of explore that world and understand more about it. And so all of these things have combined to, I think, really inspire me to become committed to Christ's way of peace and to working as much as I can to bring wholeness, well-being, shalom, salam to the world. Which means really examining the roots and the presence of militarism that are embedded in the settings in which I live and work. So glad to be a part of this book group and assist in this way.
Learn a lot from Titus always. Thank you, Titus. Jess, yeah, I think maybe that's a good natural transition. Let's hear from Jess.
Hi, my name is Jess Stoltzfus-Buller. I am in Goshen, Indiana. Have been working for the past 4 years trying to fill the very large shoes that Titus left as Peace Education Coordinator with Mennonite Central Committee for U.S. programs. And so I come as an individual passionate and interested in working against militarism, and also as a staff person representing Mennonite Central Committee, which is part of the partnership helping support and work at this campaign. MCC has a deep and rich and long history of working against militarism in all kinds of contexts. And so that's a piece of this, an important part of MCC's participation in this work and in this campaign. At a personal level, I lived and worked in Colombia, South America for close to 8 years, and experienced and learned firsthand how the U.S. military has affected the lives and the lives of so many Colombians, and has sent weapons and given training, and how significant our military aid has been to Colombia over decades. And so started learning more and wanting to be more involved from that personal experience as well. When I first started this role about 4 years ago, I did kind of a listening tour around Anabaptist congregations in the United States, asking them, what is peace education to you, and how is your congregation engaging in it? And the conversation around militarism was really interesting. I heard a lot of churches saying, we are involved in immigration, and we are involved in climate change, and all these issues that were somewhat local and that I think would be categorized under a broad umbrella of social justice issues. And there was kind of this assumption that, well, militarism is obviously bad and obviously part of, the evils of the world and something that we work against. But it did seem like there was less specific energy or less of a specific focus on it. And so it has been very energizing to me to have this platform and space to work with Sue and Jason and the rest of the advisory committee to give intentional energy to this topic again and kind of remind the church of the importance of it. And so I come excited to do that and to kind of bring some new energy and new life to this conversation in this time.
Oh, thank you, Jess. Yeah, we're so glad that you're in your position working with us. And so you did introduce yourself by your title, but maybe just a little bit more about why this is an important part of something you want to spend your time with.
Sure. I mean, it's part of the work that I do for the church, but it's very deeply personal as well. I was born in a country that was divided, and the U.S. had a big hand in that involvement. I was born in South Korea. My husband, I think he's like logging in and out, but he was also born in South Korea, and it remains divided. The last 70 years, we can't even say it's been 70 years since the war ended. We say that this is the 70th anniversary of the beginning of the Korean War, because although it is called the Forgotten War in the U.S., our country has never had an official ending of the war. And so the impact and the trauma, the ongoing trauma, the PTSD of those who have been involved in trauma, all of those things are still unnamed. The impact of militarism in the country where I was born, there's still 28,500 military-related service people in South Korea alone. And the environmental impact of military presence, the livelihood of women around the base, the culture it has fostered, the way that we understand and live with this trauma of, that they can be attacking us any moment, and to even define who our enemies are. I think I've been thinking a lot about what does it mean to who are our enemies, who's taught us who our enemies are, and these kinds of questions have been really deep in the work that my husband and I do, also in addition to the official work that I do for the church. And so this ministry of reconciliation in the country where I was born, that my husband is right now currently at visiting, is one that moves us to continue this dialogue and that it's more than a dialogue. We want to end this war, and so I have a personal conviction in this work that we do that we can't wait any longer.
Oh, thanks so much, Sue, for bringing that conviction to your work and all you do, and to Mennonites Against Militarism. Sunitha Millsaps, I'm so glad when she could be part of the group. It's one of those things where you see she does a lot, and you're afraid that you're like, well, she's not going to do another thing. But she did this, and I was just so thrilled. Sunitha, love to hear a little bit more about why you got involved and what you're doing.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sunitha Millsaps. I am the Executive Director of Mennonite Women USA, and I'm also a pastor at Prairie Street Mennonite Church in Elkhart, Indiana. I got involved in this because it's one of the areas of the church that I feel like, seems like to me, the Anabaptist church just got about all together. It floored me. It was one of the main reasons I adored being Anabaptist, was our stance on militarism, and the fact that we just sort of dropped it just really bothered me. The other part about it, though, that is most important to me has to do with my own community. Black children are off to war, off to the military, with these illusions of a saving of their lives and their families' lives. And they're going to return these great soldiers, economically stable and all this kind of stuff. And that doesn't usually happen for them at all. And so they come from communities with the generational poverty. They come from communities with poor education. They come from communities with no job prospects around at all. And then you add on top of that a government that heavily recruits in their area, in their communities, really persuasive talk about how they're going to have a new life if they join the military. And none of that falls out the way most of them expect it to be. They end up getting a job and they end up working for the military, stuff they could have did here at a factory or heck, at McDonald's, and had the same kind of life. They expect that they'll be able to give their families and bring their families out of this generational poverty. And what they're able to do is, for the most part, just survive themselves. And it bothers me that the church hasn't spoke clearly into this injustice and how it is affecting our communities, especially the communities of color and the poor communities. And so, yeah, that's why I wanted to get involved. I wanted to make sure the church was paying closer attention. There's a lot of that I think we'll talk about more about the economics of why all this happens. But at this point, that's why I really wanted to be a part of this group.
Oh, thank you. We're so grateful. Thank you so much. One good thing about this group and just the way it came together, we do have folks from sort of the signature institutions. We also have folks from Mennonite women, folks who aren't engaged in any institution. And we also have someone on the conference minister staff. And that's why she's here. She's here because she's Kathy and she's awesome. But we thought that was a great thing, too, that we have all these different levels covered. Kathy, would you care to introduce yourself and talk about why you're taking time out of your busy schedule to be in this group?
Thanks, Jason. I'm Kathy Neufeld-Dunn. Jason already implied. I am on conference staff. I'm associate conference minister, one of two, plus our conference minister with Western District Conference. So I have been hearing the cry of some of our constituents in Western District Conference saying, wait, why do we talk about peace theology and just talk? So I'm echoing some of the themes you've already heard with some of our other brothers and sisters who've spoken before me. Just saying the right words is not the whole thing that we're called to do. So I come with a biblical and theological foundation rooted deeply in the Prince of Peace. I come both personally and systemically as a volunteer with Christian peacemaker teams. So I too, though I don't have nearly the amount of time overseas, but I have my own understanding of the connections of what it means for the military-industrial complex to deeply impact people that I care about in the Middle East, Israel, Palestine, and that's significant. I also want, as I said, to listen and respond to the folks that I've been entrusted with in Western District Conference to say, yes, we hear your desires to dig in more deeply into what it means to be people of peace, followers of Jesus. So I'm really delighted to be part of this. Thanks for the invitation, Jason. And we've had such rich dialogue. I'm so glad it's going to be broadened now to include MCUSA.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, it has been very enriching. Some of the conversations we had, and we'll talk a little bit more about what came from those, but I do want to recognize that we do have a couple of folks who've been part of the reference council. They've been, their input has been crucial as well. And as Sue mentioned, Hyun, who's a co-founder of Reconciliation and does a lot of dynamic peace work, across the world. He's been with us and he's on the call now. He's not going to be able to join in. He's out of the country and it's like 3:00 where he is in the morning. And then our friend Zach, Zach actually was a colleague of mine at Mission Network. And he's taking notes so he can write a story about this because Zach's a great writer and helps us get the word out. So it really is a big group effort. But for now, I'd like to turn it over to Jess and ask Jess we've got the history a little bit. We've got the sense of some of the people that have been involved in the beginning. But what are the hopes for this Stern thing? What does MAM want to do?
Yeah. So we are really excited to launch this MAM, Mennonites Against Militarism, as a campaign, really as an opportunity to awaken the church kind of to the evils of militarism. So for the next 15 months, we are hoping that this will be a space where we can raise awareness using social media, doing webinars, telling stories, giving out facts, all kinds of different avenues that we can share this kind of information, recognizing that Mennonite, as has been mentioned, I think, by a number of us, but Mennonite history and theology supports our active opposition to militarism. And in a lot of ways, this was the focus of our peace witness for centuries. But in recent decades, as numerous of us on the panel have mentioned, I think Mennonites have become more engaged in a broader range of social justice issues in their communities, in the country, in the world. And in some ways that has affected the way that we engage with militarism. And I think our opposition to militarism has been placed on the back burner to some degree. And so this campaign really hopes to reignite our passion about the importance of opposing militarism, to offer a platform to speak out against militarism from a collective space, and to get people excited and join the movement, to make it really inclusive so that we are involving lots of people, lots of voices. As Jason mentioned at the beginning, offering a space where we are engaging the expertise of all of you who are joining in as listeners, not seeing those of us on the panel here as the only experts or the experts in the room, but recognizing that this is a collective effort where we can all speak together about this. So MCUSA and MMN through PJSN and MCC are kind of the formal partners of this, but we really hope that this space of MAM can help us reflect on a variety of different aspects of militarism so that we can demonstrate how false it is, how it pervades so much of our culture and our lives. And that means that we are looking to have a lot of partnerships beyond just these three kind of spaces, but looking to partner with churches, organizations, all kinds of different spaces so that we can touch on the many, many intersections that militarism participates in. The United States, militarism dominates our national economy, as has been mentioned, obviously influences politics, and I think it infiltrates our national narrative, affecting the education system, the media, and even our theology that has been mentioned here, the entertainment industry. So we hope to touch on multiple aspects of militarism in that sense. And at the same time, we have talked about that we want to be able to go deeper in a couple of areas and not just be spread thin across the myriad of intersections that militarism has. And so we've chosen 3 focus areas that we really want to look at intentionally, where there are intersections of militarism with environment as 1, with economy as 2, and with scripture. Now, those are not in any order. Those are just the 3 that we've kind of chosen to give some energy to in a bit of a deeper way, while at the same time we will be recognizing and kind of naming other ways that militarism is intersectional with a lot of other issues. So we have 3 different members of the advisory committee that are just going to talk briefly about these focus areas that we've chosen. So we'll just go, Clara, why don't you jump in first with our focus on the environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent most of the last 4 years studying environmental science at Eastern Mennonite University, and I'm obviously now working on climate advocacy. And I think all of us are in consensus, and many folks are in consensus, that climate change and environmental issues are deeply, deeply intersectional, which means that all these other justice issues kind of come together and are exacerbated by these deep environmental harms. And this is something I knew studying, but have become a lot more aware of. And the intersections with militarism are particularly troubling. There are some really interesting statistics. I can share articles after the fact, but the majority of wars that have been started during my lifetime have been fought mostly in the name of oil consumption. for the United States. And as I see it, as many folks in this committee see it, it becomes this kind of vicious cycle where we do violence to the countries, to the communities, when there's a U.S. military presence. And so there's that initial violence, that initial trauma, but then we use all that oil, we burn it, and we contribute to climate change. The United States is one of the highest historic emitters of CO2 emissions. And that disproportionately affects those same communities that we just bombed, that we just intervened in. And so it becomes this kind of over and over again cycle of harm. I also read something recently. The Department of Defense in the United States has a larger annual carbon footprint than most countries in the world. So while the US itself is this huge historic emitter, our Department of Defense, our military intervention is a huge part of the emissions that we contribute every single year. The infrastructure required to keep the military-industrial complex going is mind-boggling. I don't think any of us can fully imagine it. And it requires really intensive inputs. And those inputs are then in turn hurting people even more. Another way in which I've been learning a lot about the impact that militarism has is when it comes to the border wall. This is a little bit different than typical military intervention, but we know that the border wall is harming a lot of indigenous land in the West and other land that has historically been owned by marginalized communities, by Black and brown and indigenous folks. And so we see over and over again the ways in which militaristic harms and environmental harms kind of come together to hurt these populations. So this is work I'm really excited our group is focusing on. And yeah, I'll be excited to see kind of what shape this work takes in the future.
And then Sunitha, why don't you share a little bit what with the economy?
The economy piece is a big piece too, as Claire even alluded to some of that in hers. But I think what people most miss is how much we all participate in the economy of the militarism, of the military. It is a multi-billion dollar, probably trillion-dollar industry in and of itself. Corporations get paid tons and tons of money off of the taxpayer, right? Our government funds the bulk of this, saying out of somehow peace and protection of our people, which is absolutely untrue. It is not true. And because we've all bought into this lie of so-called peace, we then allow this to continue to grow and we continue to get caught up in this vicious cycle. All of us participate if you really pay attention to your own investments. Look at where you invest your dollars, and I guarantee you, your dollars are investing in something that keeps this engine going. And I don't care if you have investments through Everence. I'm telling you, if you pay very close attention, you are also part of this problem. And so until we take seriously the role that each of us play in the economics of it all, then we too are just part of the problem. And I think this is part of what is hurting us, is because we really don't want to look under the sheets, right? It sounds good to talk about it lofty and these things, but we don't want to get in the nitty gritty of how we are playing a part. And all of us are playing a part in this. The other piece that I think we need to understand is most of us buy into this, how we're taking care of the soldier, right? But the bulk of the money doesn't go to the soldiers. These people are barely making enough money to survive. And it's like we love them and we do so much for them. And well, no, that's not true. That is absolutely not true. And we need to shift that. So ask to make sure. And all you got to do is ask a current soldier, like, what do they actually make a year? How do they actually feed their families? How do they, and heaven forbid, the ones that wash out. the stories of the ones that don't make it that 3 and 4 years. The lives are just ruined into utter poverty for the majority of it. And we have to be honest about that. They show us those that were intelligent enough or had enough education to become colonels and lieutenants and all this kind of. So they show us those people, but they don't show us the everyday soldier that's getting up and going to work every day and struggling to make ends meet. That's the economy of it all that we have to pay closer attention to. And part of it is because we bought into the lie. And for those that barely got out of the hood and like this was my only option to survive, they may have made it for themselves, but it has done nothing for the community that they left behind. So the economy of this only helps those that already have a whole bunch of money. For the corporations that already have tons of money and don't need one more dollar, it's all part of that engine. And each and every one of us have a role to play in that. And so when we talk about economy, guys, we can go 1,000 different directions with the economy. But if you focus on those two right now, where are your investments? And make sure you know exactly where your tax dollars are going. And you'd be surprised if you took a deeper look.
Amen. I don't know what else to say. It's just anytime. Yeah. Thank you. And Bert is going to share about this and how we connect it with the scriptures and with our faith here.
Yeah, I was thinking it's interesting that I tend to be, a lot of people know me as an activist and an organizer, but my biggest passion actually is for the Bible and specifically the gospel, the story of Jesus, and that actually fuels a lot of my organizing and activism. And, how it connects with militarism. One reason we're engaging, of course, is it's our sacred text. But even more than that, when we dig into the gospel story, usually we're aware of those places where Jesus says not to be violent, right? Turn the other cheek, love your enemy. He stops his disciple from attacking the soldier when he's being arrested. We're aware of those things, but all that creates is sort of this idea that we're ourselves not supposed to be violent, but it's not very active. And so what has often developed is among pacifists is a passive tradition, but when we actually look at the story of Jesus, he is actually waging a nonviolent campaign of justice against an empire, the strongest empire in the world at the time. And when those of us who are citizens of the United States, especially those of us who are privileged citizens of the United States, when we look at the biblical story, and if we understand the context of it in the gospel story, in the context of the Roman Empire, we would find ourselves as Romans. Today, the U.S. is the strongest superpower in the world, and the one that occupies lands and is in.
I think the NSA has cut Bert's line. I think he's frozen. He was bringing too much truth. You're going to hear more from Bert as MAM continues down the road, just with different platforms and stuff. And I think he's already leading us, showing us a little bit of which way he thinks Scripture is taking us, or the way that we're interpreting it under this nationalist, militaristic lens that we've all sort of bought into to a large extent. Well, I hope that gives you just a sense, just from meeting folks and hearing those tidbits of how interesting and life-giving the conversations that we've had as a team have been. They have been some of the best peace and justice conversations we've had for a while. I did want to end up our time here and talk a little bit about, okay, we know how this got started, maybe what the hopes are, but how are we going to do it? And then more importantly, how can you all, everyone out there who tuned in, how are you going to be able to get involved? And I'll say one thing, that we're not thinking that we're rewriting the book on what it means to oppose militarism. Again, we know that we have a long history of this, and we want to draw on that. we want to put it out there in a way that recognizes where we are. We're in this crazy world where, everybody looks at a screen for 20 hours a day, and that's just the way it is. 30 years ago, if we're going to have this group, we probably would have had a peace concern meeting in Akron, that lasted 2 or 3 days, but we're doing it differently. And so we want to take the history we have, but also looking forward and the expertise that we have in understanding how militarism affects all these things, and put it in a way that makes sense for the time we're in terms of media and how people communicate. So that's a big thing for us. And so what that means for how we want this campaign to grow and how you can get involved in, one is sharing the information that we put out. And you'll start to see it more and more. You'll start to see the hashtag Mennonites Against Militarism that comes through. It'll come through Peace and Justice Support Network Facebook or MCUSA Facebook or any of the other people's social media. And an important thing that you can do is just to share that simply and grab that and make it and share that with your community. A lot of the information that we want to put out, we just want to, and I think Sunithia touched on it, we just really got focused on, we need to expose the untruths that are just taken for granted about the military. And so we want to put out information that just counters that. That just says, no, that's not accurate. And where you think your money going is it's actually going to other places or what have you. So that's an important thing. Just find the information that we put out, and hopefully it's going to be coming from a lot of different sources. And we want you to be a part of that and use it as you can and influence your church and your own networks. Then the other thing that, way that you can get involved is just engage in the opportunities that we try to create. And I think that's sort of the balance that we're trying to strike here is that, as Jess said, MCUSA and MCC and Mission Network, we have platforms and their staff, and a lot of people look to us to get information about the church. And so we can draw a crowd sometimes, as it were, but it doesn't matter if people don't engage. And so if this is an issue that we want to reclaim as a people and as a church, it's really going to take people saying, what, I do need to make time for this. And what we envision for the next 15 months are educational opportunities like webinars, but also opportunities for in ways that we want to encourage you to organize locally at the conference level or at the church level, to make sure that this isn't getting lost in day-to-day life. And we want to organize advocacy opportunities with our friends at MCC Washington. So we have a lot of things coming in this 15 months, and maybe you'll get sick of hearing them, but we want to make sure that you see them, and then we'll ask for you to engage in them as you can. And then the third thing I would say, the really tipping point of all this is going to be when the campaign is not ours, when the campaign is all of ours, right? This Mennonites Against Militarism, the hashtag or the name, it doesn't belong to us. It's our churches. And so we're asking you, grab that, claim that, and run with it. You come up with the social media, you come up with the opportunities. And if there are ways that we can help you as institutions or as people, let us know, we'll do it. And that's really the way the power is going to go. We can have a campaign for 15 months and everyone can feel good about it, and maybe it moves the needle. But if everyone, the 63 people who are watching this call now, if everyone said, what, how can I manifest being a Mennonite against militarism in my life and in my congregation and in my local area, then we're going to see a lot of movement. So we're not trying to sell you something today. We don't have a product we're trying to get you to buy or something to download. We're trying to invite you to this larger conversation and say, look for it, join in where you can, and then lead us too. So tell us where you want us to go and how we can help you live out this part of your faith. And I think with that, we're kind of getting to the end of our part. We did have some questions come up in the comments in the chat here, and I'm going to post them to the group, and we can answer them as we can. Maybe we won't be able to answer them. But we got one from our friend John Stoner. Could Mennonites develop a program to address the moral injury which afflicts the national and Christian psyche of Americans because of their complicity in militarism? And I think maybe he's talking a little bit differently about, PJSN and MCC. We did some work on moral injury that affects some soldiers after they've seen combat. And EMU does a lot of good work on that. And we've developed some materials for that. I think John might be talking a little bit broader, like we're all enmeshed in this and we're all damaged to a certain extent, whether it be in the specific ways maybe that Sunitha talked about economically or theological or psychic ways. So that's a pretty big one. I don't know. Anybody got any plans to work on that one? John always prods me in the right direction, maybe to ask questions that I wouldn't ask on my own, and I think maybe this is one that this group needs to work on.
That's a really interesting question. One of the differences I see is oftentimes warriors or soldiers that experience the trauma of war and moral injury, they come to a place of recognizing that there's something very deep that they're struggling with, and they seek help for it. I think one of the differences might be for a group of people like Mennonites who are so complicit with this militarism, which is embedded in all of our lives. It doesn't really dawn on us that we're complicit or that there's something wrong with the complicity or a lack of awareness of how it's damaging us. We always think of it as something out there that's harming other people in lands far away without thinking about the damage that it does to us to be complicit with it and be quiet. So we have to start from a different place perhaps, but very interesting question.
The one thing I add to that I found interesting too is that, it's pretty established that in the Mennonite faith, we would try to steer people away from joining the military, right, for obvious reasons. But it's not that easy anymore, right? I know of people, I know an engineer who says, his job is to design the trailers that they take the drones from the loading shed to the drone or whatever they do. And he says, well, how am I complicit in that? So what if you're fourth or fifth down the supply chain and you have a computer science degree? I wrestle with that. What is your part in this? And all of us, to different degrees bear that. So that is interesting.
I would also add to that too. I think right along with what both of you have just said, the issue that happens for those that come home, soldiers that come home mentally and emotionally disconnected. Their families see and understand how the military and going into the military has affected them emotionally and mentally. But it's hard to share that within a community when you start saying, don't send your son or daughter to the military because it's an economic engine to get out, right? However, they all still see the effects of when they come home and even the struggles that many of them have while they're in the military. And so it is this moral dilemma that we go through over and over and over again. And one might survive and one might do really good from the community, but we'll lose 10 to that one. And so that we have to have some deeper conversations. We really have to push this, I think, from the church a lot more than what we do.
We had another good question here from John Lapp, and it's a little, I'll sum it up and say he's talking about counseling veterans. MCC had a program in the past, and in Germany there was a program to counsel people who were in the service and wanted to get out. And I think this gives rise to just to focus on two things really quick, to say that, there are going to be good programs and resources that already exist, and we're not going to reinvent the wheel on them. And so, Mennonites Against Militarism, we want to point you to existing organizations or resources that can help in specific areas that we might not have expertise in. This is one. We don't necessarily have any plans now to start something like that I know of, but there are some good programs already that already exist that do counsel veterans. Titus, I think you've been involved with that for a while. Can you point us to a website or a description of what they do?
Well, a couple things. The one I'm involved in now is similar to the one in Germany, where we're dealing with active duty folks. GI Rights Hotline, GIRightsHotline.org is the URL for that. But in terms of veterans, Jason, you and I worked on a curriculum for congregations some years back, Returning Veterans, Returning Hope. I think it's on your website, the PJSN website. So it's a 6-lesson curriculum for congregations to look at ways that they might prepare to engage more with veterans. There's also work done by Rita Nakashima Brock on moral injury related to veterans from a faith perspective. I'm trying to remember the name of the website right now.
Soul Repair?
Yes, the Soul Repair Project. Thank you, Linda. Soul Repair Project. Very excellent resources related to moral injury of veterans that you can look up on the web, or I could also send you the link. So those are just a couple that I think of.
And how about counseling people who are in the service who want to get out? That's a slightly different.
Well, send them to me or to the GIRightsHotline.org.
GI Rights
800 number that people can call. I try to take at least one call a day. We have counselors spread around the country. We're not one centrally located office, but we work with individuals within the context of the military regulations related to how they might get a discharge. And just a historical note, this was actually the conscientious objector discharge for military folks was not a possibility back a number of years ago, but because of work done by historic peace church folks, peace section folks back in the 50s, around the time of the Korean War, with people like Edgar Metzler and others going to the Pentagon to advocate for military folks in the Korean War that had developed a conscience against participation in it, the military eventually in 1962 provided conscientious objector discharge option for folks in the military. So that's a little bit of history there. But yeah, the GI Rights Hotline would be the place to contact.
And we have talked even previously before this campaign again about what would a network look like to counsel people before they get in the military. When you have these young people who think, you know what, my options are really limited, but it's easy to say, well, no, there are a lot of options. There are a lot of creative ways that you can accomplish what you want, but it's really hard to get through, right? I mean, you almost need someone walking with you to find those resources and access them. So that's sort of a glint in our collective eye on a thing that we would like to see set up. A couple more questions here as we reach the bottom of the hour. From Wayne Yoder in Ohio, could the tag have been Mennonite Churches Against Militarism? Wayne, I want to tell you the angst that we went through on naming this thing, I would not wish on anybody. We did have a lot of different options, and we ended here. We do want to develop something that's more specific for churches that will encourage churches to be involved and participate in this campaign. And that'll be one of those things that you'll see that we'll post on social media and whatnot. But it's a fair question. We came out the way we did, but we do want to make sure that we're encouraging churches. Good question from our friend Mike Martin. Is there room to address the military surplus that finds its way into our local law enforcement? I'm sure there is a way. We might not be equipped for it as a group, but this is one of those ways where we want to intersect with other groups in the church. And we're not trying to say that we have the answer. So there are groups, or at least one group, forming to examine the militarization of the police in some way. And I don't know, Sue, if you want to talk a little bit about that group.
Sure. And so with a lot of conversation on the abolition movement, I think as we are speaking, they're finalizing the curriculum so that we can talk about just that. We're not telling people one thing or another, but we are talking about what is true safety, what does militarization of policing look like. And so that conversation is definitely happening, and we might be hosting, MAM might be hosting a webinar so that people who are interested in that conversation can come together. And Mike, you can be a panelist for that.
Hey, well, one more before we'll go here, and this is from Dwayne Beck. He's the guy that got me into this mess. He's the one that took me from reading books about Mennonites to saying, hey, why don't you sit here with us and learn how to sing and actually learn how to be a Mennonite. So owe him a debt. And Dwayne says, well, so how do we get this movement to disengage from this right-left political controversy and move it towards more of just a biblical faith thing? And that's a good question that we talked about in our group as well. And we hope that we're addressing that somewhat in how we're trying to address the information about the military. Well, you're not necessarily going to hear us endorse a lot of different things or candidates or whatnot, but we want to put a lot of information out there so people actually know what's going on. And so we think if we can stay in that space where we're giving the information and letting people decide and always bringing it back to our faith, then that's probably the best that we can expect to do given the polarized climate. And with that, I want to draw this to a close and say thank you very much. I want to say thank you to my colleagues on the panel here for all the work they've put in through this year and for being here this afternoon. Most of all, thank you all here for having interest in this topic. And again, we're just getting started. It's a conversation that we want to have on all different levels. Look for us, join in it. You can email us. We're all pretty easy to get a hold of if you got Google. And, we're all ready for a conversation. Look for what we're doing, join in, and thanks for your interest. And with that, we'll pause here. We'll stop it here, and we will see you very soon with the hashtag Mennonites Against Militarism. and have a great rest of your day.